Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host with the moster, Dusty O'Connell. Joining me, as he customarily does, on the other end of the internet tin can and string, to my internet left, Arif Hassan. How you doing, Arif?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. I just realized I forgot to give you the Minnesota Vikings blogger extraordinaire and useful human appellations, but I feel like everybody knows that you are those things already, so I'm not super concernicus about it.
I mean, we're going to have, in theory, new listeners every show, right? They should know sort of the shape of things, right?
That's the idea. I was flipping through, I was doing the best I could to try and flip through our iTunes reviews, because iTunes may be like for the largest private company in the world and how instrumental iTunes has been to their success, Apple really has done a terrible job with iTunes. It is a garbage desktop app.
I 100% agree.
So I was struggling to see whether we were winning the 5-star reviews race with the Titletown Sound Packers Talk podcast, which, good news, we are, handily.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, well, as far as I can tell, the reviews are not organized by date, so there may be some.
I think you can, but we figured out how many, on the day of, we wrote down somewhere the number of reviews for both. So when time comes, we'll be able to check it.
Yeah, exactly. We can just go from the date of the start of the contest and figure out all the reviews. But we are currently doing very well, and the content of the reviews is generally good. I got the best I could hope for. Someone told me that I make them chuckle a lot, which is really my only goal in life, just in general.
That's a step up from chortling, right? It's better than chortling.
it's a notch above a chortle. Probably better than a snicker, I would say. I think.
Significantly better than a snicker.
Yeah, I think a chuckle is borderline actual laugh.
Right.
So we'll take that. But if the iTunes reviews are any indication, then we are definitely getting some traction via the iTunes. Our popularity bars are very high for the most recent episodes. I don't know how they determine that, but that's.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how it's like a self-reference, popular relative to previous download numbers, right? That's got to be it.
Well, and it's relative to other podcasts that were released on that day too. It's basically people listened to this, at least some people downloaded this.
Good news, thanks guys.
Yay! So between the iTunes reviews and also our fabulous new stickers, I think we'll be in prime position to attract new listeners for every episode. If you would like a sticker, and you're a Patreon subscriber, or if you are like a repeat PayPal donor, we've got records of all that stuff, but oftentimes we don't have your most current address. So shoot us an email at norsecodepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll just send you a sticker, because we are grateful for your support of the show over these approaching as we approach our 5th season, I guess. If you would like to buy a sticker, they're $5. norsecodepodcast.com/merch, and you can get hooked up with a luxurious vinyl bumper sticker that says Norse Code. It's basically the condensed version of the episode cover page that's on YouTube and all the Libsyn downloads and stuff. They're great stickers. I slapped one on my laptop and on my thermos. Stopped short of the car, but that had less to do with me and more to do with external forces, we'll say. Actually, we're hitting maximum merch season. We will have two items in our online store coming soon. The training camp guide is nearing completion, but before I pick your brain about that, I wanted to just briefly mention a fun story that I heard on another Minnesota sports podcast that I greatly enjoy, Gleeman and the Geek. They talk about the Twins, and Aaron Gleeman is my spirit animal. I enjoy his commentary so much, and I wish I could be I think the two of us come from such different backgrounds that I could never podcast the way he does, and like I've already spent too much time refining my style to just like start aping his, but I wish I could, because he's just so like chill and funny and all the things that I wish I was. But anyway, so he's talking about this guy. He's a Packers fan and he lives in Chicago, and he has season tickets to the Bears, but he sells them all except for the Packers games. Like he literally, like, he just wants to see the Packers play, and he likes to do the some of the preseason stuff, like the on-field like walk-arounds and kind of get the full fan experience. But the guy wants to do it while wearing a Packers jersey, and the Bears organization takes issue with that, and they told
no
him,
way,
well, right? Well, to me, it seems like just a very like silly sort of thing. I mean, the guy is paying God knows how much money for Bears season tickets. They should be grateful that they have any season ticket holders at all, regardless of what they choose to wear to the on-field events. I mean, maybe I guess
so you're taking this guy's side then.
Well, I'm not really like taking a side. I can see the ridiculousness of the Bears organization being like, you have to wear our uniform. Like,
no,
if
I don't think he. So I am somewhat familiar with this. I don't think they're saying you have to wear our uniform. They're just saying you can't wear that one,
not someone else's. All right, so you can either wear no uniform, I think is reasonable, or our uniform. And the guy was very like peaceful about it. He's like, look, you don't have to send security. No one has to tase me, but I'm definitely coming to the on-field event, and I'm definitely coming in a Packers jersey. And they wouldn't let him in. So he did what any good American would do and sued.
Right.
Claiming First and 14th Amendment violations. First Amendment doesn't really apply here. Yeah.
Yeah. What?
Turns out. Well, because that's that's the go-to. Like whenever you want to sue, you just say that your free speech rights are being violated, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, they're not. And it's funny, the argument his lawyer made for the 14th Amendment applying, he reached all the way back to a case from the 1970s where a female reporter was banned from the New York Yankees locker room because, that just wouldn't be an appropriate place for her. And
wait, so is he arguing that, like, people wearing Packers jerseys are a protected class?
Oh, well, and that is the final point. It turns out that being a Packer fan is not a legally protected class.
Weird. Who would have seen that coming?
I know. I mean, maybe under the ADA. Oh, no, I did not say that. No.
Oh, wow.
Ouch.
So now I'm like kind of curious about like lawyer. What lawyer wouldn't advise you to like not do this?
One that you are already paying.
Yeah, I guess you pay them before. Like that's just such a silly waste of time.
It's true. But I like I said, I can see the ridiculousness of like being barred from an event that you have paid like a handsome sum of money for. Like this guy, like clearly the money is not an issue because he can buy season tickets and then just like invest the amount of time needed to sell all except for what, 3 of them?
Yeah. Just
so he can like go to these events and like show off his Packer pride. And to me, I mean, wear whatever you want. Like as long as you're not like, as long as he doesn't show up in like a gimp suit or like head to toe fishnets or something. Like as long as he's not like, well, see, and this is where it gets dicey. I was gonna say as long as he's not oppressive to look at, but I mean, if you're a Bears fan, maybe some dude standing there in a Packers jersey qualifies.
Yeah, I feel like organizations can have some control over, what's going on the field, right? Like if this, I don't think there's a good analogy, right? Because you can't be like if someone walks into a Target wearing a Walmart shirt and Target kick them out, everyone would be like, "That's ridiculous, Target, don't do that." What? But it just seems a lot more reasonable to me here. The Bears would be like, you can still come, you just can't wear that.
But he
do anything
for
love.
He doesn't even really want to go to the Bears thing. He just wants to go there wearing that. Like that's part of the fun for him, which fine. But
I'm saying they don't have to entertain Petty. That's all.
Exactly. And although in spirit I agree with some of his arguments, it turns out that he does not have a legal leg to stand on.
I'm so shocked that he's sued. That's just amazing. Well, but also that the suit contained like references to the First and 14th Amendment. That's actually more amazing than suing. It's like I thought that would be like, yeah, I'm suing you for breach of contract violation. Like that makes a lot more sense to me.
Exactly. This could be such a simple, like, pedestrian, like, hey, you know, there's nothing in the rules about being a season ticket holder that says that I have to wear like certain clothes on certain days or that I can't wear certain clothes on certain days. You know, that the contract law part of this is probably much more specific and less hilarious than like going to court with like two sweeping constitutional rights violations. Neither
like
of which
a
apply.
Private organization, right? Like it's just amazing.
I would like to apologize to our listeners for any like random thumping in the background. They're performing significant construction on my building. They're taking down the entire back stairway and putting a new one up. And unfortunately, there's nothing I can do. I offered them stickers, but they still wouldn't stop. They asked me what a Norse code was, and I told them, listen to the podcast, and they were like, what's a podcast? So not much traction with the construction crews. Man, I actually did kind of like struggle to wake up this morning. I was awoken at the crack of 8:15, which is like which is like 4 a.m. for a normal person because I generally work very late nights. Not the way Arif does, but similar. And simultaneously, I heard construction sounds, dogs barking, a garbage truck backing up, an emergency siren. What was the other one? There was like some weird noise like inside the apartment, but it was just like a legitimate cacophony of like outside sound. And I thought, you know, maybe city life isn't for me. Okay, on to the show. Thank you to everyone who has contributed to Norse Code in the past. And we would not be able to do awesome things like the ratings contest with Titletown Sound or the London trip or Arif going to training camp with a MiFi or, you know, this or that or the other thing. All of that comes directly from the plant that our listeners water with their support, their monetary support, which you can become a contributor in any amount you desire at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and become a recurring contributor in any dollar amount you would like. And we'll even send you a sticker if you give us $3.50 a month or more. So please consider contributing to Norse Code as we ramp up for the approaching football season. What are we at, like 48 days? Something like that? 50 days-ish?
There's a lot of people doing countdowns. I don't know. 48, that sounds right. Sounds good.
We're pretty close. And like realistically, like some of the most fun we have is like imagining what the season could be like before it all blows up on our face in like week 5. And an instrumental part of that is the most comprehensive. In fact, I think you've changed it. Like you're no longer calling it the training camp guide. Like now it's just Arif Hassan's 2017 Vikings guide.
Yeah, part of that is because it just looks better on the page if it's shorter. But part of that's also like a better reflection of the content inside of it because it gives you... Because, I mean, it's not like where to eat in Mankato, which is like valuable information to have, admittedly. But it's more just like, you know, these are the Viking schemes, your scouting reports on the 84 players in camp. Here's some essays about, you know, stuff the Vikings need to do. So yeah, it's more about, you know, the Vikings and less about training camp. Now, at the beginning of each guide, there's also like, here's what to watch for when you're in training camp in terms of like drills and stuff. Like if you wanted to sort of dabble in player evaluation yourself, see how some players are doing. You know, there's some information on drill. And so that, like, in that sense, that part is potentially like a training camp guide. But it's more comprehensive than that. So for aesthetic and practical reasons, the title has changed to just Vikings Guide, Arif Hassan's Vikings Guide, 2017.
And the cover is very sexy. It looks fantastic and is...
by far the best cover we've had.
Oh yeah, and extremely indicative of the quality of content inside. That is to say, the content is very shiny purple.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you have an estimated release date? Is there anything that you want to tease us with coming out of the guide this season, or should we leave that for the numerous weeks of plugs leading up to the season?
I keep on pushing back the release date because there's always like more stuff I want to add. I should get it out there. But I was kind of hoping to finish it late tonight, and I'll have like a solution for selling it by tomorrow morning, hopefully. So by the time people listen to this, there should be a way to purchase it.
Yeah, and we'll at least have, if we don't host the purchasing part of it on our website, then we will at least have a link to where you can buy it at NorseCodePodcast.com.
Right, exactly. And I think that what's going to end up happening is the fine people at Dojo Marketing are going to find a way to host it at ZoneCoverage.com, and then they'll market the guide, and they'll take a cut this time, but I think it'll be worth it. We'll see. If it's not worth it, then I'm just going to go back to the old model.
It's true, and Norse Code didn't really take a cut of it necessarily. We just appreciated the minor bump in website traffic, which I look back at the analytics and it was mostly people going directly to that page and then leaving. So,
hooray!
Well, that's fine. We don't really the website is basically like a place for people to see their name in the donor list and like maybe make a contribution, whatever. The show happens through RSS feeds and the Daily Norseman and all that stuff. It's not a huge deal. It's just Squarespace provides
anchor,
such.
I think is maybe the best way to think of it.
Yeah. Squarespace provides such like awesome commerce integration. I mean, it's not free, and they take a cut, but it was just so easy. We were like, well, how can we get this out there for the least amount of work? And Squarespace was right there.
Yeah, I don't know if people remember previous years, but like they would like PayPal me money, and then I would email them the guide manually from my Gmail account. That worked at the beginning because there wasn't like an enormous audience, but then the audience like kind of increased somewhat substantially, and I was just spending all day emailing and like, then I would go to sleep for 3 hours, and someone would buy the guide at the beginning of my sleep cycle. They wouldn't get it for 3 hours. So now that operation is automated, I'm much happier.
I can only imagine. So, turning briefly towards the Vikings, the only news item of note is that we finally have a number on Michael Floyd's beginning of season suspension, and it's 4. Now, does that?
Well, okay, so sort of.
Yeah, so I was about to ask you, like, what does that? Is that like 4 games to be served concurrently or simultaneously or like consecutively? I guess concurrent and simultaneously the same thing. Will he be serving his suspensions concurrently or consecutively?
Well, we don't know if he's got another suspension yet. So, but the NFL, is pretty consistently like tacked on additional suspensions. So, there hasn't been an indication that the next incident is suspendable by the NFL, and that they're going to. So all we have is the suspension for his initial extreme DUI charge that he was found guilty of in Arizona. We don't know if that includes an aggravating circumstance for violating the terms of his house arrest in Minnesota. I suspect it does not. Otherwise, they probably would have included it in the release. So I think that there's going to be another suspension coming that's going to come afterwards. And so the problem is that like it's broadly defined what a second incident under the it's not the substance abuse policy. There's like a separate policy just for drunken driving, but it's like it falls under the substance abuse subhead of the NFL rulebook, and so it's very clear from the nature of the rules that second incident refers to a second drunk driving violation and not like a violation of the terms of your whatever, right? And so a second one is an 8-game suspension, and I don't think that's going to be it. But but it's it's something that I guess keep track of. It's possible. As it is, the original policy for the first violation is 2 games, but aggravating circumstances, in this case, blowing twice the legal limit, brought it up to 4, and that's all actually very clearly spelled out in the rule book. So, yeah, so he's been suspended for 4 games, possibly more. We may find out during the 4-game suspension because the NFL, I guess, takes its time with these sorts of things, which in some senses is like a good thing, but also is a very frustrating thing to the players, fans, and the team. So they should probably speed up the process without rushing the process, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, it would be nice if they know what they're going to do, or if they have a pretty good idea of what they're going to do. They should probably pull the trigger on it because it makes planning so much easier for teams. But so basically, what we've got here is a floor, right? Like, and we were all kind of expecting, like we talked about this before on the show. We were all kind of expecting a 4-game suspension for the initial extreme DUI, right?
Right, and a lot of fans were thinking maybe it was going to be 2 or it's going to be 4 and then brought down to 3. But I think the rules are very, very clear that it was going to be 4 because of the aggravating circumstances.
Well, and I think any chances for a bring down are gone now. And,
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So further suspension would, and I'm gonna test your knowledge of the rule book here. Would that fall under the substance abuse policy, the general player conduct policy, or both?
That's tough, right? Because the substance abuse policy has 2 types of violations in it. The first is for a recognized substance abuse problem. So if you fail a drug test or have some other form of substance abuse problem, you don't have to fail a drug test to be in the stage 1 of the substance abuse policy, which generally means that you're seeing someone on the team, giving them updates on treatment, and then you're also subject to multiple drug tests. And if you violate the substance abuse policy again, then you're in stage 2, and that includes I think stage 1 includes a fine, but stage 2 includes a fine and a small suspension. And then if you violate it once more within the next 30 days, then you're in stage 3. That's an 8-game suspension. It's pretty severe. But there's a separate carve out for drunken driving, and you'd think that this would fall under that, despite the fact that the incident itself is not a drunken driving incident. It's a violation of the terms of parole, and so they've got a whole set of steps for multiple violations of the drunk driving policy, which this is. I don't think it technically is. So it might be a player conduct. It might be under the player conduct rules, in which case the suspension can be random. The rules for substance abuse and the rules for drunken driving and the rules for performance enhancing drugs, they've got very, very clear guidelines for how many games this is, what circumstances you can expand the number of games, etc. But the player conduct policy is just whatever.
On the next episode of Rudy and Floyd, Michael Floyd is executed when this random number generator reaches 0. All right. So we initially had plans to tape an episode last week, but we didn't get there because Arif wasn't there. Well, and by there I mean Minneapolis. You were certainly somewhere. In fact, you were in Wisconsin attending what I assume is stats nerd Coachella.
Yeah, it was NerdCon.
Well,
yeah,
most cons are NerdCon.
Okay, fair enough. This is the Great Lakes Analytics and Sports Conference. #GLASC. Which
it's like a Star Trek villain.
They were trending in Wisconsin, man. But yeah, it's it's very explicit about what it's about. It's about analytics and sports, and it's a regional conference that generally pulled people from the Midwest, although it had some people from Texas and the Northeast and stuff like that. And yeah, it's what it sounds like. It wasn't MIT Sloan, but it brought in a bunch of people with insights about the use of analytics in sports, to have talks and discussions and whatnot. And what's great is that we always think of analytics in sort of this fairly narrow way. Usually player evaluation, very often trying to convert college production into NFL draft status, or convert combine workouts and the NFL draft projection, which is, something I do. I'm obviously not knocking it. I love doing it. But, analytics in sports encompass so much more. There was an entire track that I did not attend because I wasn't remotely interested, but there was an entire track of the conference devoted to the business side of sports, like customer retention, which probably includes things like don't tell them what they can wear.
I know. I wonder if our Packer fan came up in that discussion.
I wouldn't know. I was not remotely interested in that track. But there was like stuff like injury prevention and in sports science and stuff like that, which is cool. It's one side of analytics that I think is getting a little bit more attention. And there's stuff about strategy. So some of the most interesting talks were about how we can model spacing in basketball using mathematical tools, and how we can get a better understanding of what's happening on the court in a way that's a little bit more incisive, just in terms of basketball, in a way that's a bit more incisive. So one of the things. One of the really good examples was Russell Westbrook last year. One of the arguments against what Westbrook was doing, which was sort of an MVP caliber season, was the fact that he took a bunch of mid-range jumpers, which is the least efficient shot in the NBA. And so that kind of begins the discussion about the way that he's decreasing the points per possession, but when you bring in a bunch of the spacing data, for example, you see that in the situations where he arrives at a mid-range jumper, he's actually taking the most efficient shot he can. There's not another option for him to take a more efficient shot because he didn't have a guy who was pretty good at catch and shoot threes open based off of the spacing analytics. And the spacing analytics also tell us that there was too much help usually on these shots for him to drive the lane, right? And so there's an added layer of context that we can model, and we can start testing some of the stuff that was true, but sometimes difficult to verify when we were making qualitative arguments about these things. So an analytics guy might say Russell Westbrook takes too many mid-range jumpers, and that's true, but that doesn't make it Russell Westbrook's fault. It might be the fault of the coach who's designing a poor offense, or it might be the fault of the front office who's not creating enough, catch and shoot three opportunities by not signing the right players. It's true that he's taking too many mid-range jumpers, but we're not figuring out why. And, a lot of people would make a qualitative argument, what's he supposed to do? And now we've got, more evidence and data about a quantitative version of that. And that's just one example, right? Obviously, I attended, as many football talks as I could. Eric Eager, who we should bring onto the show. I don't know if we've actually brought him onto the show, but I've used him, in a couple of articles. He writes good stuff. He's been on podcasts with Matthew Collar at ESPN 1500 on his analytics podcast. Eric Eager had a fantastic talk about better ways to use the data we have available to start modeling wins. So the way that we tend to model wins just based off of points is okay. It does a decent job predicting games, but we can actually incorporate Pro Football Focus data because Eric Eager is doing analytics for Pro Football Focus, and how combining Pro Football Focus data and weighting the importance of players by looking at how much the grades impact win rate, we can do a better job of figuring out who's going to win future games. The perfect example is it's a close game. It's 28-25 or something like that. And the only reason that it's 28-25 is because two 58-yard field goals were hit by the team that ended up winning. Well, that doesn't mean that team was better. It's actually probably a worse team, right? And the PFF data will capture that a little bit better than the points data. And he was going through a bunch of the math it ended up being over my head. I remember there's a lot of linear algebra, and that was the last math class I'd ever taken for a reason. I just stopped. I was like, I'm out. And that he was just pretty casually just using matrix transformations and stuff. I was like, yeah, okay, sure, fine, I believe you.
You put your pen down. You're like, all right, I'm just gonna sit back and enjoy.
Yeah, right. I was just like, all right, cool. Those are definitely numbers on a screen, so I'm following along. Yeah, and there's all sorts of stuff, right? Tracking player use and player performance, not to evaluate players, but to determine what to make, how to make those players better. There are analytics that go into psychology. I talked to Diane Bloodworth, who's a CEO of Competitive Sports Analysis. She does analytics that help college teams recruit, and it's not to rank the college players. That's like not a very good way for colleges to recruit. Although I imagine Alabama would figure out how to use a 5-star no matter what. But like it's about finding sort of the best fit based off of what the program needs, because two programs with similar recruiting profiles or similar recruiting pool to draw from, say like Yale and SMU. They're both not going to get 4-star, 5-star recruits. They may get some 3-star recruits, but SMU doesn't have to emphasize academics as much. Yale does, and she can create fits for each program based off of these sort of macro level things like academics and sort of the micro level things like what you value in a running back. Do you value raw speed more than the ability to break tackles on contact? So she gives the app to the coach, and they move these sliders around about what they find most important at each position. And the UI was designed by an NFL scout, so it speaks the language that the coaches speak, and all the background analytics stuff they don't have to interact with, because that's not a friendly user interface. That's not useful. You shouldn't have to train your customer that much if you don't have to. And so and that's a whole different realm of like analyzing fit instead of determining who the quote unquote best player is. It's not something we're doing a very good job of in football analytics right now. So there was like a lot of stuff that we were covering. I'm sure I missed a lot of really good insights, but like it was really interesting and nice. Schedule analytics is another one. I attended 2 talks about that, about how to design schedules. And the people at Wisconsin Stevens Point, their students actually help schedule actual Division III football and basketball games based off of data science and ways to be fair to every team, ways to minimize travel fatigue and stuff like that. That's a form of analytics. So yeah, I had a lot of fun. I produced 2 stories at zonecoverage.com. There should be a 3rd story once I can figure out what sort of the angle to that 3rd story is. Got a bunch of good interviews, talked to some people that were super fun to connect with, and so on.
And this is something that I would have, if I had been closer to Wisconsin, would have enjoyed attending. If I had to pick one talk to view, I would have seen Philip Mayman from the University of Bridgeport's talk about, it was titled "From Noob to Smurf: Advanced Analytics for League of Legends."
I was actually going to attend that talk, but he could not arrive because his flight had been too delayed.
Ah.
Yeah, I probably would have brought that up. That was I said I was probably going to attend that talk. It was occurring concurrently with my good friend Ethan Young's talk about Sladix and using workout data to figure out draft prospect profiles. And so, I kind of wanted to attend his out of obligation. Sorry, Ethan. I really did want to attend the League of Legends one.
Well, they had to nerf Philip Mayman at the last second because his talk was too powerful.
It's true. It's a new update.
But the most interesting thing to me, just looking, aside from the NFL analytics stuff, which, you can look at the title of a talk and not really learn a whole lot from it. You kind of have to be there. But it was cool to me to see, 1, 2, 3 specific talks about, for example, Charlie DeClean from Bellin Health, using quantitative data to make return to sport decisions and prevent injuries. And there were a couple of other talks that were kind of focused on the either measuring athletic performance or looking at existing data in order to better prevent and treat injuries, which I think is a field of sports analytics that would be much more easily embraced. Hopefully there are no Joe Morgans in doctors' offices, and being able, having young coaching staff and young team staff equipped with this kind of information and this kind of appreciation for analytics can potentially have big impacts on player safety going down the road.
Yeah, and there's been some advances in the way teams try to figure out injury risks for players. But I think that what a couple of these talks, because I definitely attended I think it was probably one of the first ones on the injury uh, prevention analytics parts of the talks. There's a lot of ways that coaches are already doing it. They're investing in nutrition. They're trying to figure out sort of determining player load and seeing how often or how much players are working during practice, making sure they're not overworked, and that's part of it. But part of the stuff, I don't know if teams are doing it, or I don't know if teams are buying into. I mean, they might be, but as far as I can tell, the return to sports information, the return to sports stuff, is not really uh, determined using quantitative data. Which is not to say that the qualitative data that the athletic trainers are providing isn't good. It obviously is, but you can supplement it with some interesting quantitative data, which that's one of them. The talk that I watched was about trying to figure out sort of the asymmetries in for example, right side, left side is one of the most common asymmetries in the way that players move. So, for example, if a player has a stronger right ankle, right, or a stronger right side when he's moving, that could create some stress on the left side, and that asymmetry could potentially cause injury. And they've got data-centered ways to try and figure that out. They've also got they're trying to figure out, if you're more flexible with one type of range of motion than another type of range of motion, there's a good chance that that's going to increase injury risk. And that's another type of data that helps you avoid injury. And I'm not sure that teams are as invested in that yet.
Well, hopefully down the road, right? And I mean, at least there was like Edward Egros from the Dallas Fox 4 news station give a talk on sports analytics and television journalism. And I mean, as much fun as it is to complain about certain sports analysts or play-by-play guys just like reading media guides and not really paying attention to analytics, the more people get comfortable, and I mean, it's the sort of thing that starts at the top. The more people get comfortable with thinking about and discussing analytics, the more I feel like teams will incorporate that into, the more front offices will make their teams incorporate that into kind of the way they work. I mean, we've certainly seen it with baseball.
Yeah, I loved Edward's talk. We actually talked afterwards. I had a great interview with him for like 10 minutes, and then we actually just hung out at a bar for like the next 2 hours. He's super cool. He's got a master's in predictive analytics, and his bachelor's in both journalism and economics with an emphasis in econometrics. So he knows what he's talking about, and he and a colleague of his have designed, systems like to try and measure college efficiency in a better way. Because a lot of times when we're discussing college teams, you've got two teams with wildly different strengths of schedule playing each other, and like if Appalachian State is like number 3 in the country in total offense as measured by total yards, and they're playing against Alabama, who's only number 17 in the country in defense in total yards, no one's going to believe that Appalachian State has a better offense than Alabama has defense. Those are clearly driven by schedule. And we can't even use points by itself, or even opponent adjusted points, because it doesn't give us a good shape of the pace of the game and stuff like that. So he's worked with a colleague to try and figure out a better measure of college efficiency, and he uses that in his sports broadcast. And he talked a lot in that talk about the challenges that come with. He was the weekend sports anchor at Fox 4 in Dallas. He talked about the challenges that come with being a local news television correspondent who only has 2.5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes on a good week to discuss 4 games and introduce or talk about analytics in the discussion. He talked about a couple of strategies. He's got a website, InsideSportsAnalytics.com, that goes into a lot more detail about the stuff that he talks about every week. And so, he'll say, for example, Texas A&M is 10th in offensive efficiency, 17th in defensive efficiency, and they've got 3 ranked opponents coming up in their schedule. They control their destiny, but in the meantime, they're going to have to play South Carolina. I believe that they'll win. And he can go into what he means by efficiency on the website, or he'll talk about why, hey, Temple's going to beat SMU. They've got the best special teams in the country. We'll probably talk about, why that's the case. And he also talked about like the way that we communicate analytics as journalists. I'm not very good at this, but he was talking about ways to increase communicative power while decreasing a particular statistic's explanatory power. So I talk about adjusted net yards per attempt all the time. It's one of my favorite passing statistics, and he seems to be pretty familiar with that as a statistic. And he was talking about how he prefers to use net yards per attempt. And there's a whole difference in terms of the ability to explain. So adjusted net yards per attempt is your yards per attempt, plus it takes into account sacks, plus it gives a bonus for touchdowns and a penalty for interceptions, and it weights them all. Net yards per attempt it's very easy to explain. It's just yards per attempt plus sacks, and that's it. It's very easy to explain, and it's much more powerful than yards per attempt. It's much more powerful than total yards. It's much more powerful than passer rating, but it's also easier to explain than something that's a little bit more powerful than that, adjusted net yards per attempt. And so, he's talking about, the sacrifices that you might have to make in terms of precision in order to communicate what you need to communicate better. It was a fantastic talk, and I've got a piece up at zonecoverage.com about communication of analytics, both in terms of the way journalists speak to the public and about the way analytics departments have to speak up to teams or third-party companies have to sell to leagues or teams, which I think it's a good piece. Go read it.
So will you be attending Glask next year as well?
Hopefully. We'll see. They were generous enough to entertain. Actually, Ethan hooked me up. He was like, "We should get a media pass." You know what? I'll email the guy, and he got me a media pass. And I talked to the organizer, Scott Tappa, who's really nice. And he seemed to enjoy my presence there. He liked the 2 stories I've written so far. Hopefully he'll like the 3rd story. And hopefully the conference grows too, and so they could benefit from additional media coverage. So yeah, that's the hope. If they give me another media pass.
Well, and if not, it's like $80 to go. So if you would like to send Arif to #Glask, then patreon.com/NorseCode or paypal.me/NorseCode, and we'll make sure that he gets his fill of analytics, if such a thing can be had.
Just stuffed full of them.
Just packed full of measurement tools. Wait, no, never mind. I think I saw a video like that on the internet once. All right, should we take a look at the mailbag?
Yeah, sure.
All right. We did get an email question from frequent contributor Logan Reed that I'm popping up right here. Yes. Who do you predict wins the 3rd linebacker job?
I think it's Edmund Robinson. I think that there's a good shot that Emmanuel Lamur could start. That would make me kind of disappointed because I think he's topped out and I think he's not particularly talented. And I think besides that, there is the possibility that Ben Gideon or Kentrell Brothers, assert the existence of a middle linebacker spot and push Kendricks to the Eric Kendricks to the outside on 3 linebacker sets. But I think those are both kind of, or not both, but I think that one's kind of a long shot option, and I think it's more a contest between Edmund Robinson and Emmanuel Lamur. And I think Edmund Robinson's going to win that out, not just because he's younger, but they've got very similar athletic profiles. And so really it'll be down to, your technical capability, your ability to take on blocks or display the right footwork, and then also your, instinctive or mental capacity, your ability to react to the play quickly. And I think that, at least in some respect, that Edmund Robinson probably has an advantage over Emmanuel Lamur in that respect too.
A follow-up question. What is your biggest grammatical pet peeve? For example, mine is when, and this is Logan, not mine. Mine is when, in an effort to sound more sophisticated and proper, someone incorrectly uses the subjective case I instead of the objective case me. Examples, just between you and I, or he told John and I.
I used to care a lot about this, and the more I've written, the less I've cared. I don't know, like, I'm sure you can bring something up and I'll be like, wait, no, I'm wrong. That absolutely does piss me off. But off the top of my head, there's not a lot that's ticking me off. I don't know, maybe I'm just too afraid to cause conflict. Maybe it's the Minnesotan in me.
And part of it is that like we speak more and more in emoji now, and there's no particular like emoji grammar is very free form. there's not a whole lot of rules as far as that goes.
Right.
But if I was to pick one, I would say it is not respecting the transitive nature of a verb. And there's one specific case that drove me insane when I lived in North Dakota, and that as soon as I left, completely disappeared. And I can immediately tell that somebody is from like the upper Midwest, like North Dakota, northwestern Minnesota, if they say it. And that's if somebody were to ask me, can you borrow me your lawnmower?
Oh my god. Okay, yeah, that does tick me off.
Like it's
weird.
You hear it all the time in the upper Midwest, and it used to drive me absolutely nuts. It's like trying to explain something important to somebody when you have the hiccups. Like, no one can take you seriously if that's how you sound.
Yeah, I'm on board. Yeah. See, I told you. You would bring something up that I would just agree with, but hadn't come to mind.
Well, that's and for me, that's like the only one, because I'm with you. The older I've gotten, and it's not just the emoji thing. The older I've gotten, the more I've realized that language is generative, and whatever makes you understood is probably fine. However,
we're gonna receive some emails accusing us of like the destruction of the English language.
Well, whatever. So the rules of prescriptive grammar were written by a monk, and he claimed that God told him how English should be spoken.
Then who are you to disagree with God? Wow, Dusty, that's a lot of hubris.
That is an entirely different argument altogether, and he and I disagree on enough other things where, depending on your interpretation, we may not get very far together.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, the rules of grammar have changed pretty substantially since then too, and stuff that we consider not just correct but like proper, or like educated, sophisticated, would have been uncouth, 100, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, and a lot of the grammatical constructions from 300 years ago would sound not just bizarre but simply uneducated now. And so these things change. I don't know, like and so this is not quite grammar, it's more etymology, but one of the most interesting things is the word you, and whether or not it used to be formal or informal, whether or not thou was supposed to be formal or informal, whether or not you and thou were the same word and that you was pronounced like thou. Like, it's a good weird debate. I'm not a linguist or an etymologist, so I'm sure I'm missing some very crucial context here. But yeah, I mean, we started using the word you a lot, I think because Shakespeare decided he wanted to use the word you a lot. It's language changes.
So really, like, the English language was destroyed from Proto-Hollywood. It's always been Hollywood in the media.
Pretty good way to put it.
Basically.
Damn it, Shakespeare. You've ruined the English language.
It's all your fault. Oh, man. Alex Goebel writes in, aside from Martellus Bennett, did the Packers make any moves in the offseason that make them considerably better against the Vikings?
Probably. I haven't been paying that much attention. I mean, I'm sure they've drafted some players that I thought, weren't bad. I don't know. I kind of come away from a lot of Packers drafts not really agreeing with it. And like, even so, sometimes when they make, good picks that I think at the time are good, they turn out not to be good. Like Devontae Adams, although he may turn out to be finally good. Who knows? I'm looking up the Packers draft right now just to see because they don't typically make free agency moves that are at all interesting. Although the Martellus Bennett one, that one's a really good move. But let's see, Kevin King, that's a whatever pick. Autoplay video, excellent, thank you. Josh Jones, Josh Jones, that was a really good pick. He was a really good safety. That one's a bit more of a threat. Montravius Adams, I thought he was a terrible pick. Vince Beagle, a lot of people are split on that dude. There's some people who thought he was like a second round pick. Some people thought he was a 6th round pick. Picking him in the 4th, probably good. Jamal Williams, I was one of the few people that was super down on Jamal Williams, so that's a whatever pick. I don't know anything about D'Angelo Yancey, their wide receiver from Purdue. I know a little bit about Aaron Jones, the running back from UTEP. I thought that was a fine pick. But in terms of like threats, oh man, they got another running back, Devonta Mays. They got a lot of them. Malachi Dupree, probably a good pick. But in terms of threats, I think maybe Josh Jones is the only one that worries me. Maybe Kevin King is going to live up to his hype, but I didn't buy it at the time.
Luke Larson writes in, what did you think of the Vikings offseason write-up on the NFL subreddit? Specifically, what are your thoughts on Bridgewater versus Bradford? Are we really going to keep doing this?
Okay, you like stopped yourself after. I don't think I read it. I did not mean to do that.
Where's that instant rim shot button?
I don't think I perused the post. So I don't really have that many thoughts. So I don't know what the nature of their argument is. My argument has always been that Bradford will never be good at third and long. He is better at throwing downfield, but he's not better at deciding to throw downfield. So, yeah, I mean, it's surprising, because a lot of people have compared Teddy Bridgewater to Alex Smith. It's surprising to be like, well, Teddy Bridgewater is a much more aggressive quarterback. And yeah, I think he is. And I think that more than makes up the difference. And I think that Bridgewater's a better quarterback. I don't know what their argument is, though. I can't comment on it.
Yeah, I didn't. I was hoping you had read it because I didn't. And I feel
I'm sure I will after this podcast.
Yeah,
though.
I mean, I'm gonna. Maybe we'll have some thoughts on it next time. But what is there to say? It's the quarterback is going to be Bradford until Bridgewater is healthy, and then when Bridgewater is healthy, he's probably going to get a shot. Like, I don't know what else there is to say about it. Follow-up question from Luke: pizza rolls or bagel bites?
What? Pizza rolls, obviously.
Yeah, the bagel bites, like, the texture is just, it's like too aggressive. If I had like wolf teeth, I might consider bagel bites.
Yeah, that's a good way to. The biggest downside of the bagel bites is definitely the lack of wolf teeth.
They just get so chewy. Texture. It's unnecessary.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I don't dislike bagel bites, but if I get to choose pizza rolls, I'm choosing the pizza rolls.
Honestly, if neither is a choice, then I would choose neither. But that's I'm old. I have to get my cholesterol checked and stuff.
Yeah. Pro tip: par bake the pizza rolls and then fry them in bacon fat. It's delicious.
Oh my God, you're a monster.
It's so good.
Oh my God, I kind of want to do that. It's been over a decade since I've purchased pizza rolls. And now I'm vaguely curious. Adam West writes in.
No, I have to tell you this last thing. We have some duck fat, and Chelsea wouldn't let me fry the pizza rolls in the duck fat. She's probably correct.
Is she afraid your wings would melt off? You might have gotten a little too close. Man.
Anyway, Adam writes.
I can't stop thinking about duck fat now. God, dude. Should there be more concern / intrigue with the special teams unit? New punter, new returner, new punt gunner, etc.
I'm worried about the return game. I think that the Vikings have benefited really substantially from two generational returners. The Vikings have, and this is actually, there's going to be an analysis, a little bit of this about the importance of the return game and separating individual returners from the blocking around them, and what tools we have to determine that. But I think that there's really good evidence that it's simply that Percy Harvin and Cordero Patterson were just transcendently good kick returners, especially Cordero. I mean, Percy was obviously top 5 in the league when he was returning, probably top 3. But Patterson, top 1. And I think that is definitely based off of my research, and you just watch Patterson do stuff. Definitely a result of their individual talents and not the result of Mike Prefer and the blocking unit around them. Just not to say they don't play a role based off of the research I've done, but I think that the evidence we have indicates that that's it's going to be a pretty substantial loss for the Vikings. And the Vikings are the only team that have generated a really substantial, significant advantage over the last 8 years in kick return. Like their average field position off of kickoffs, which I think is a much better way to evaluate it than kick return average, because if you've got a returner who has the same attitude as Patterson, but like is just not as good and returns a bunch of kicks out of the back of the end zone, their return average is probably going to be above 25, but they're making bad decisions for their team by not taking a touchback. And so, or you could have, sometimes the Vikings deal with, kickers kicking away from Patterson or kicking to the 1 yard line so that Patterson would have to return from there. That affects his kick return average. So instead I look at average field position after kickoffs. If teams are conceding 28, 29, 30 yards because they're worried about the threat of Patterson housing it, then that's a positive impact that Patterson has created that should be measured and is not measured by traditional kick return statistics. So I looked at average field position after kickoff. The Vikings have like a 4-yard advantage or something absurd like that over the average team, and like a 2.5-yard advantage over the second best team, which is the Bears. It's just nuts. Like the difference between the Bears and the Texans. So the Texans have been the worst team over that time. The difference between the Bears and the Texans is something like 23 yards to 20 yards. And the difference between like the Vikings and the Bears is it's just so enormous. And so that results in anywhere between, depending on sort of which expected points model you use, anywhere between like 18 to 25 points a season, which can be pretty substantial if you're in a bunch of close games like the Vikings were. The Vikings were 2-4 in close games this year. Would have been nice if they were like 4-2, So yeah, I think it's going to be a significant problem. As for the punting, kicking, long snapping, well, I guess there's not a new long snapper, but effectively because there's no chemistry between the punters and the kickers and the long snapper, effectively new. As far as that goes, I'm not as concerned because there's not really like a drop off, right? Because we had such a poor kicking game from Blair Walsh this last year, I guess this last year. I was trying to figure out if Kai Forbath had kicked the whole year. He had not. So yeah, I think that there's kind of only upside when it comes to that. That's going to be important in close games. And punting, that I'm not concerned. We've only had one good year out of Jeff Locke. It happened to be this last year, but I don't think that was sustainable. The Vikings didn't either. And so Ryan Quigley is not a good punter. I'm kind of hoping that Taylor Simank is going to, grab the job and be a halfway decent punter. But yeah, it's that I'm not as concerned about that. My biggest concern is probably just going to be on getting the snap timing, because it's not just that they're going to be working with a long snapper that they're not familiar with, is that they're going to have fewer reps too, because the kickers, there's 2 kickers and 2 punters all competing for spots on the roster, which means you're going to have the final combination of kicker, punter, long snapper. You're only going to have 25% of the reps in camp than you normally would have. So that is a concern. You might have a fumbled snap, you might have a bad hold or whatever. But I'm not concerned about a generic drop off in punting or kicking capability.
All right. Judd Zolgad's hoodie writes in, if you were promised that the Vikings would win the Super Bowl in US Bank Stadium, but you would have to lose your sense of taste for the rest of your life, would you do it?
Oh, Jesus. I mean, definitely considering it.
Hard no. I know somebody who lost his sense of taste when he was in high school.
You can still smell, though, right?
Not really.
But in this hypothetical.
Well, I guess I would have to pin that down. My feeling is like just knowing what my friend went through. The senses of taste and smell are pretty closely intertwined, so it's hard to lose one without the other. Like if you were just to lose your taste buds, which Hootie mentions as a possibility in the question, even then probably not. I don't know. So much of my life is, frankly, I would need another career if I couldn't taste anything.
That's true.
And
yeah.
podcaster is not that lucrative, so.
Right. that's not as true for me. I could continue to eke out a living writing about football without a sense of taste. Not that I write with much taste anyway. Heyo.
Zing.
That one's tough. The fact that it's tough is also kind of interesting to me. I would probably say no, and I think the reason I say no is because I've got enough faith in the current makeup of the Vikings to take that uncertainty and hope that they poop out a Super Bowl.
Well, and like if we're being honest, part of being a Vikings fan is knowing that whoever promised you the Vikings would win the Super Bowl would pull a Lucy with the football, and then you would lose the sense of taste and the Super Bowl.
You don't even have,
So, Zen Cupid writes in, what other forms of entertainment and hobbies have kept you guys occupied during the off season? I'm officially out of football-related questions. While we're running thin on football-related answers, thank God August is coming.
I don't know. I've been writing a lot about football, so.
No, other forms.
I like watch movies. I do stuff that people do, right? I watch the cinema.
What are you, Hillary Clinton? I do human things.
I headed down to the local Nickelodeon, watched a fine young movie. The Avengers? Is that still out?
Talkie.
Yeah, so I watch stuff. I don't know, like the draft took up a significant amount of football attention. So it's not as if it was not football stuff for me. And then like the not football stuff, I cook a lot. Obviously, we just referenced that. Went to a museum. That's cool. I just stuff, man. I played video games.
Yeah, I do human stuff. I mean, baseball, obviously, and this has actually been a pretty fun baseball season to watch. The Rockies and the Twins both started out way above expectation and have kind of slowly been heading back to earth, and it's been fun to watch both teams try to figure out how to cope with that. The Twins coped with that by signing one of my favorite starting pitchers of all time, Bartolo Colon. In another,
there's a rumor that he was going to retire after the game he started. Like, that would have been hilarious.
No, after his if he bombs his next the he might retire.
Okay,
which would be 2 starts. And what's funny is that the Mets wanted him back, and they offered him a contract that had more money in it than the Twins contract, but the Mets wanted him to spend more time like pitching in the minors. And the Twins basically promised him, like, hey, we'll just get you warmed up, and as soon as you look like you're game ready, you can come right into the rotation. So he pitched like 2 games in the minors and came up, and he picked the Twins ostensibly because he wanted that like guaranteed rotation spot. Like he wanted to be able to pitch in the majors. And now, after pitching 1 game that ended sort of ignominiously for him, he's considering retiring. So it's a very Twins thing to have happen.
That's so funny.
My favorite Bartolo Colon story is one time he threw like 7.5 innings, all fastballs except for 1. Like he threw 1 slider.
What?
Yeah, and a reporter asked him after the game. He was like, "Why did you throw a slider there?" He was like, "I forgot."
I also like that the question was, why did you throw a slider, and not, why was every one of your other pitches a fastball?
Well, no, but that's Bartolo Colon's thing. Like when he was young, he would throw like 80 to 90% fastballs. He's never had very good command of a breaking pitch, but what he can do is just like paint the outside edge of the strike zone with fastballs. Like he could pretty much put them wherever he wanted, and he just became like super reliant on a really great fastball. Now that he's had like a 20-some year career, his body won't really let him do that anymore. He's his fastball command is faltering, and he no longer has like he never had a good off-speed pitch that he could like rely on. So yeah, fastballs are still the order of the day.
Why'd you throw a slider?
I forgot. Sorry. Richard Snowden writes, what are the pros and cons of training camp in Mankato? I assume as opposed to having it somewhere else. Yeah. And how do you feel about rookie-only days?
I don't know how I feel about rookie-only days yet. I'm going to answer that question first. Because it's weird, but it doesn't necessarily make it worse. I don't like it's gonna take longer for the veterans to show up and put on pads and be valuable and have meaningful snaps, which is kind of frustrating. But I don't know. It might be a good thing. I don't know. I don't know what rookie-only training camp offers that rookie minicamp doesn't offer, except, I guess, fewer players so you can focus. But I don't know. I don't have any feelings on that. It might be a good idea. It might be a bad idea. As for pros and cons of Mankato, and logistically, it's obviously a lot easier to have it at the Vikings team facility in Eagan. It's probably a lot cheaper, and it's probably simpler for like the players to show up and stuff like that. The team staff doesn't have to like leave their home for like 3 or 4 weeks or whatever, right before a season where they're going to have to be out of their home constantly. Those are probably the pros to moving it. Plus access to higher tech facilities, and access to your own nutrition program and all that. I kind of still hate it though because I like the atmosphere of Mankato. I like the atmosphere of going down to like camp, and it feels like camp because you're not in the city. You're out there. So that's probably the pro of Mankato. Like I don't think there's many other pros. I'm sorry, but yeah, I feel like having that kind of experience outside of kind of like a retreat probably has measurable team chemistry benefits that are probably very very small and not as good as the benefits of having it, in Eagan. But I liked it more. So those are my thoughts. It's probably better for the team. It kind of sucks for Mankato, and it kind of sucks for the atmosphere of it, which I just enjoyed a lot.
Well, all right. That's going to do it for the mailbag, and consequently, this episode of Norse Code. Unless you have a parting shot or something that you'd like to tease beyond the training camp guide in the future.
Nah, it's just a training camp guide.
Just the thing I've been working on for months that represents the most comprehensive, like, single piece of Vikings knowledge that anyone can buy.
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, just that. That's fine. We will return at some point. Probably. We still got a couple weeks until training camp, right? I don't know. If something cool happens next week, we'll be here to talk about it. But otherwise, we'll be like news dependent. I think. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, it seems fair.
Yeah. So when it turns out that Michael Floyd is suspended for 13 games, you will hear us complain about it on the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings, Norse Code. And I guess until then, we are and shall remain just a little below average.
I like that you've come to embrace that.
Look, it's not worth fighting. We'll see you then.